You're probably scrolling through a dozen workstation listings right now, wondering if any of them will actually let you get the work done without emptying your wallet on a machine that ends up gathering dust. The fear of splurging on the wrong tower, one that's either overkill for your needs or underpowered for the tasks you actually need to run, is real, and it's why I'm taking a few minutes to walk through the Lenovo ThinkStation P3, model 30HA0021US, the way a buyer would, after digging through spec sheets and the handful of reviews that do exist. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the environment this box is meant for. A ThinkStation is positioned as a professional-grade mini tower, aimed at engineers, designers, and content creators who need a reliable workhorse that can stay on 24-hour shifts without hiccups. It's not a gaming rig, and it's not a cheap office desktop. It sits somewhere in the middle, offering a solid amount of raw compute power in a footprint that will fit under a typical desk. If you're the type of user who regularly runs CAD models, 3D renders, or multitrack video edits, the i7-137000 13th Gen processor with its 16 cores is the sort of thing that will shave minutes or even hours off render times. On the flip side, if most of your day is spent in Outlook, a web browser, and occasional spreadsheet work, you'll likely never tap into the full potential of those cores, and you might be better off with a less expensive system. The first thing I looked at after the headline specs was the memory and storage combo. 16GB of DDR5 RAM is a sweet spot for the workloads I've seen professionals run on a ThinkStation. It's enough to have several heavy applications open side by side, say, SolidWorks, Photoshop, and a few virtual machines without the dreaded not enough memory slowdown. The 512GB SSD, while not massive, is fast enough to keep the OS and your primary project files snappy. In practice, I've seen creators keep their current projects on the SSD and archive older work on an external NAS, which sidesteps any concerns about running out of space too quickly. If you anticipate needing a larger local library, think hundreds of gigabytes of raw video footage, you'll probably want to add a secondary drive yourself, but the base configuration gives you a solid launchpad. Connectivity is another area where the ThinkStation tries to justify its professional label. The description mentions up to 10 faster than standard Ethernet, which translates to a 2.5 gigabits Ethernet port on the rear panel. In a real-world office setting, that means you can pull large project files from a central server in a fraction of the time you'd expect on a typical 1 gigabit network. For freelancers who upload high-resolution renders to cloud storage, that speed can shave a few minutes off each upload, which adds up over the course of a month. The trade-off, however, is that the machine only offers a couple of USB-C ports and a handful of USB-A ports, so if you're used to plugging in multiple external drives, a USB hub will become a necessary accessory. Power is supplied by a 300W unit, which is modest but sufficient for the components that come standard. The i7-13700 isn't a monster GPU-hungry chip, and the ThinkStation P3 doesn't come with a dedicated graphics card out of the box. That means you'll get decent integrated graphics performance for 2D design work and light 3D previews, but anything beyond that high-end 3D rendering or GPU-accelerated simulations will need an upgrade. The good news is that the Minitower chassis does have room for a mid-range workstation GPU, and the power supply can handle a modest addition, but you'll have to factor in the extra cost and ensure the case's airflow is adequate. Now, who should actually consider buying this machine? If you're a small to medium engineering firm that needs a dependable workstation for each designer, the ThinkStation P3 gives you a professional OS, Windows 11 Pro, right out of the box, along with the management tools that come with it, things like BitLocker encryption and group policy controls. Those features can save an IT department a lot of time when rolling out security policies across dozens of machines. Freelance architects who run AutoCAD, Revit, or similar tools will also find the core count and RAM to be a comfortable fit, especially when paired with a future GPU upgrade. Even if you're a content creator focusing on video editing at 1080p, the CPU and fast SSD will keep timelines fluid and render queues moving. Conversely, you should skip this ThinkStation if your primary tasks are everyday office work, web browsing, or light photo editing. In those scenarios, the cost of a 16-core, 16GB DDR5 setup is hard to justify when a simpler desktop with a lower-tier CPU and less RAM would perform just as well. Also, if you're planning on heavy gaming or need a machine that can handle out-of-the-box 4K video editing with GPU acceleration, you'll be disappointed by the lack of a dedicated GPU and will have to budget for an aftermarket edition. Finally, if you need